Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Spiral of Memories. Chapter 1, The Invitation to Stillness. Lyra stood by the window of her apartment, gazing out at the flickering streetlights that danced on the wet pavement below. The city never slept, not really. Even in the early hours of the morning, there was always the hum of traffic, the distant wail of sirens, or the occasional shout echoing between concrete walls. It was beautiful in its own way, but lately, it felt like her soul was being stretched and pulled taut by the unrelenting rush of city life. That's when the letter came. It wasn't an email or a message on her phone, but a real letter, handwritten in elegant cursive and sealed in a lavender-colored envelope. The sender, Myra Wren, her childhood friend, the one who used to climb trees and catch fireflies with her during long summer evenings when they were both just wild-hearted kids. Lyra hadn't seen Myra in over 5 years. After high school, life had swept them into different worlds, Lyra into university and eventually a job as a freelance illustrator in the city, and Myra into the gentle hills of the countryside, where she'd bought a little cottage on the edge of an old, forgotten town. Lyra opened the envelope slowly, savoring the scent of dried lavender that drifted out as she unfolded the parchment. Lyra, I hope this letter finds you well. I know the city can be a lot sometimes, and I thought maybe you need a break. Why not come stay with me for a while? I've got a guest room with your name on it. The weather's warm, the garden is blooming, and there's a secret I want to share with you. Something I think you'll love. Come soon. Love. Myra. There was no pressure in the words, no urgency, just a quiet invitation. Yet something about it tugged at Lyra, deeper than nostalgia. It was as if the letter had arrived not a moment too soon, like a rope tossed to someone drifting out too far. She didn't hesitate. That night, she packed a bag. Not much, just the essentials. A sketchbook, her favorite pens, a couple of soft t-shirts, and the old Polaroid camera she hadn't used in ages. She fed her plants, left a note for her neighbor to water them, and the next morning, she was on a train heading far from the noise and glass towers of the city. The train ride was slow and soothing. As the scenery changed from buildings and billboards to rolling hills and distant woods, Lyra felt something inside her start to unwind. She let her head rest against the cool glass window and closed her eyes, letting the rhythmic motion of the train lull her thoughts into silence. When she arrived at the small countryside station, Myra was waiting. She looked exactly the same and completely different all at once. Her hair was longer, sun-kissed and braided loosely down her back. Her clothes were simple, a linen dress, a straw hat, but she glowed with the kind of peace that only comes from time spent close to the earth. Lyra, Myra said, arms wide, her smile full of warmth. Welcome home. They embraced, laughter and tears mingling without a need for explanation. The drive to Myra's home was short but scenic. They passed by golden meadows, dense forests, and narrow gravel roads that twisted like ribbons through the hills. Birds flew low across the road, and Lyra caught glimpses of deer watching from the tree line. Myra's cottage was nestled at the edge of the woods. Ivy crept up the sides of the weathered stone walls, and flowers bloomed in joyful chaos around the porch. Wind chimes sang softly in the breeze, and somewhere nearby, a stream babbled over smooth stones. That night, after a simple dinner of lentil stew and fresh bread, they sat by the fireplace with mugs of chamomile tea. "I have something special to show you," Myra said, eyes twinkling. "Not tonight but soon." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "A secret?" Myra nodded. "A sacred place. A hidden gem. Something that saved me when I didn't even know I needed saving." And just like that, Lyra's curiosity was caught like a moth in lantern light. That night, she lay awake in the soft guest bed, staring up at the ceiling while the chirping of crickets lulled her deeper into the countryside's rhythm. There was no noise here, no sirens, no distant honking, no neon buzz. Only the rustle of trees, the whisper of wind, and the hush of something ancient that lived in the land itself. Tomorrow, the adventure would begin. But tonight, Lyra simply breathed. And for the first time in months, the breath didn't feel like a struggle. Chapter 2, A Morning Wrapped in Sunlight and Stillness. Lyra awoke to a silence so profound, it almost sang. She blinked against the soft light streaming through linen curtains, golden beams flickering across the wooden floor like ripples on water. Outside, birds chirped in gentle cadence, weaving their melody into the peaceful hush of morning. There were no car horns. No footsteps pounding on stairs. No neighbor's television echoing through the walls. Only stillness and the warmth of a sun that had risen just for her. She sat up slowly, her body still wrapped in the cocoon of deep sleep, her mind drifting between memory and dream. The bed was softer than anything she remembered. The blanket smelled faintly of rosemary and wood smoke. A sense of being cradled, cherished. She stretched, yawned, and padded barefoot across the room. Myra had left the window open slightly, and a breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine and something sweetly earthy like rain after a long drought. Lyra leaned out slightly, catching sight of the garden, tall sunflowers swaying beside tomato vines, bees bumbling lazily between lavender stalks. Everything here moved slower. Purposefully. Without rush. Downstairs, she found a small note on the kitchen table, written in Myra's looping handwriting. "Gone to the market for some peaches. There's cold brew in the fridge and your favorite almond bread on the counter. Make yourself at home. P.S. Today might be the day. M." The words made her heart skip, not just for the promise of some elusive discovery, but for the simplicity of it all. No deadlines, no alarms. Just life unfolding like petals in the sun. She brewed a cup of coffee and toasted a thick slice of almond bread, spreading it with fig jam Myra had made herself. Lyra took her breakfast to the back porch, settling into a wide wooden chair. The cushion sank under her like a sigh, and she watched butterflies dance between patches of chamomile and mint. As she ate, she opened her sketchbook for the first time in weeks. Her pencil moved slowly, at first hesitant, unsure, but then it flowed. She drew the porch railings, the way ivy wrapped around them like quiet fingers. She sketched the garden gate, slightly crooked, and the weathered boots resting beside a watering can. She even tried to capture the way sunlight curved through the leaves. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that felt like enough. When Myra returned, her arms full of peaches and fresh basil, Lyra helped unload the basket and wash the fruit. They didn't talk much, there was no need. Just the sound of water trickling, knives slicing gently into ripe flesh, and the occasional quiet laugh when a peach slipped out of their hands. After lunch, Myra disappeared for a moment and returned with a small canvas bag and a mischievous smile. "Are you ready?" she asked. Lyra tilted her head. "Ready for what?" "The secret," Myra whispered, as if saying it too loud might scare it away. They changed into comfortable clothes, shorts, sandals, wide-brimmed hats. Myra packed a water bottle, some trail mix, a towel, and a small first aid kit. Lyra added her camera and sketchbook. They set out on foot, following a narrow path that wound past the garden, through a break in the tree line. The forest beyond was old, its trees tall and watchful, their roots gripping the soil like ancient guardians. Sunlight filtered through in ribbons, dappling the forest floor in shifting patterns. "People forget this trail even exists," Myra said, brushing aside a low branch. "It used to lead to the old quarry, back when the town was still known for its stonework. Most maps don't even show it anymore." Lyra followed closely, heart fluttering with something she couldn't quite name. It was part curiosity, part reverence, part the kind of thrill that comes from stepping into a place forgotten by time. As they walked, Myra pointed out little signs, natural breadcrumbs hidden from most eyes, a rock carved with initials, half buried by moss. A row of stacked stones that had once marked a boundary. A rusted fence post, leaning like it had grown tired of standing guard. "It's a bit of a walk," Myra warned gently, "but it's worth it." Lyra didn't doubt her. They stopped once beneath a large sycamore, its bark pale and smooth like bone. Myra passed her the water bottle, and they sat for a moment, listening to the breeze rustle the canopy above them. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker tapped a hollow rhythm. "How did you find it?" Lyra asked softly. Myra smiled without turning. "I didn't. It found me." She offered no further explanation. The journey continued deeper into the woods, the air cooler and more fragrant with pine and fern. The forest seemed to close in around them, not in a suffocating way, but in a way that made Lyra feel safe. Sheltered. Held. And just as she began to wonder how much further they had to go, Myra stopped. There, tucked behind a curtain of hanging ivy and tall golden grasses, was a narrow break in the trees, a space where sunlight spilled like a promise. "We're close," Myra said. Lyra's heart pounded. She stepped through the gap, one hand brushing ivy aside. What lay beyond would change everything. Chapter 3, The Secret Hidden in Sunlight. The moment Lyra stepped through the curtain of ivy, it was as if the world inhaled. A hush fell over everything, deeper than quiet, more ancient than silence. It wasn't the absence of sound, but rather the presence of something sacred, like the first moment inside a cathedral before a note is sung. She pushed past the tall golden grass, feeling it brush against her legs like soft fingers. The air was cooler here, saturated with the scent of moss and minerals and something sweet and strange, like wild honeysuckle. Her breath caught in her throat. And then she saw it. Spread out before her, nestled in a cradle of ancient stone and overhanging trees, was a pool of crystalline water so clear it seemed unreal. The surface shimmered with light, broken only by the occasional ripple from falling leaves or the lazy glide of a dragonfly. Massive rock walls, carved by time and weather, rose up around the hidden basin like natural fortresses. Vines crept down their faces in tangled patterns, and moss softened the edges, making the quarry look less like a place abandoned and more like a sanctuary reclaimed by nature. Lyra stood frozen at the edge of it all, barely breathing. It was perfect. Too perfect. How? How is this even real? She whispered, almost afraid to speak too loud. Myra came to stand beside her, her expression soft and full of knowing. It's been here longer than anyone can remember. Some say the quarry was filled with spring water after it was abandoned. Others say there's a hidden underground river that feeds it. No one really knows. Most people in town have forgotten it even exists. Lyra took a cautious step closer. Pebbles shifted under her feet, and the earth gave way to smooth stone. There was a narrow path that circled the edge of the pool, a natural walkway carved into the rock itself. "It feels like magic," she said. Myra smiled. "That's because it is. Not the kind with wands and spells. The older kind. The kind that grows when no one's watching." Lyra set her bag down gently, almost reverently. She dipped a hand into the water. It was cool, but not cold. Refreshing. Alive. The kind of touch that made you forget every tired part of yourself. There were no buildings here. No signs. No fences or warning posts. Only the whisper of trees, the song of water, and the occasional rustle of wildlife. Even the sun seemed gentler here, filtered through branches and dappled across the pool like scattered gold. A smooth flat stone jutted out near the edge, half in water, half in sun. Lyra sat there, legs curled beneath her, sketchbook in hand. Her pencil moved almost automatically, tracing the rise of the quarry walls, the curve of shadows, the glint of light on water. It felt less like she was creating art and more like she was recording something ancient. A testimony. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Myra only nodded. "When I found this place, I was in a dark chapter of my life. Burned out. Hollow. I stumbled here by accident one afternoon when I was trying to get lost. And then, suddenly, I wasn't lost anymore." Lyra looked up. "You never told anyone." "Only you," Myra said. "Some places, they're not meant to be shared too widely. They lose their magic when too many feet tread on them. But you, I knew you'd understand." For a while, they didn't speak. Myra laid back on a sun-warmed boulder, arms folded behind her head, eyes half closed. Lyra returned to sketching, occasionally pausing to watch the slow drift of a butterfly or the gentle sway of the tree canopy above. And then she heard it. A splash. She turned just in time to see Myra diving into the water, her body cutting through the surface like an arrow. For a heartbeat, she vanished, swallowed by the stillness. Then she emerged with a gasp and a bright, wild laugh that echoed off the quarry walls. "Come on in," Myra called, water dripping from her hair. "It's like swimming in liquid light." Lyra hesitated only a moment before standing, stripping off her outer shirt, and walking barefoot to the edge. She touched the water with her toes, then her knees, and then she leapt. The moment she hit the water, the world vanished. There was only soundless clarity, the cool embrace of the pool holding her like a secret. For a moment, she floated beneath the surface, eyes open, watching sunlight refract above like shattered glass. Bubbles drifted past her face like tiny stars. She rose, gasping, hair slicked back, heart pounding, and laughed. Not a small laugh but a full-bodied, eyes closed, soul-deep laugh that hadn't come out of her in years. She and Myra swam until their fingers wrinkled. They raced from one side to the other. They floated on their backs, letting the sun dry their faces, and told stories, some true, some made up. They shouted into the stone walls just to hear their voices echo back in harmony. And all the while, Lyra felt something changing. Something unwinding inside her. Later, they lay side by side on a wide sun-drenched rock, hair drying in the breeze. Lyra turned her head toward Myra. "You were right." "About what?" "I needed this. More than I even knew." Myra reached over and squeezed her hand. "There's more," she said, eyes glinting. "This place has secrets. We've only just begun." Chapter 4, Whispers Etched in Stone. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the trees, casting golden light across the quarry like melted honey. Lyra and Myra lay on their backs atop a wide stone slab, still damp from swimming. Their hair was tangled and heavy with water, their skin kissed by the sun, and their hearts light with something they hadn't felt in a long time: wonder. The laughter had faded into silence now, but it was the good kind, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Only the sound of distant birdsong and the faint ripple of water remained. Lyra stared up at the canopy above, where beams of sunlight filtered through the leaves, shifting gently with the wind. Her fingers absently traced the small grooves on the rock beneath her, a series of shallow scratches, at first unnoticed. And then, she froze. There was a heart carved into the stone. Not drawn crudely like a child's doodle, but etched with care. Inside the heart were two initials, T. W. plus E. R. The lines were faded with time, softened by sun and rain, but still visible. Still present. She sat up. What is it? Myra asked, shielding her eyes from the sun. Lyra brushed her hand across the carving. Someone was here. A long time ago. Myra smiled, sitting up beside her. There are more, if you look. Curiosity ignited, Lyra rose to her feet and began wandering the edge of the quarry. The stone walls were like ancient scrolls, weathered by time but full of stories. She found more initials, some within hearts, others surrounded by stars or arrows. One inscription read, Summer 86, J. M. was here. Another simply said, free at last. There were names carved in careful script and others scrawled recklessly in jagged lines. One corner of the wall had been turned into a mural of sorts, faded now, but the remnants of painted flowers and suns lingered like ghosts of joy. Who were they all? Lyra asked, turning back to Myra. Myra shrugged. Lovers. Friends. Teenagers sneaking away from home. Adults needing escape. People who found this place like we did, and left something behind so they wouldn't be forgotten. Lyra felt a strange tightness in her chest. There was something deeply human about the act, carving your presence into stone, declaring to the world, I was here. I mattered. She ran her fingers across the name Ellie Rose and wondered who she was, and where she was now. And then, further up the path, something different caught her eye. Not a name. Not initials. A symbol. It was etched just above eye level, into a smooth section of stone, a spiral, perfectly formed, with a small circle at its center. Lyra stared at it for a long moment. This one's different. Myra came closer, her eyes narrowing. I've seen it before. Do you know what it means? No, Myra said quietly. But I think it's old. Older than the quarry? Older than the town? Lyra touched it. The stone was warm beneath her fingertips, but the spiral gave her a chill. Not fear, exactly, more like awe. Like something sacred. Maybe it's a mark of protection, she whispered. Or a portal. Or a memory, Myra added. A doorway between past and present. They stood there in silence, watching the spiral shimmer faintly in the fading light. Lyra pulled out her sketchbook and captured it, line by line, afraid she'd forget how it looked once they left. That night, back at the cottage, Lyra couldn't stop thinking about the carvings. The initials, the messages, the spiral. It was like they had stumbled into a living memory, a collective echo of all the lives that had touched this place. She sat by the open window, candlelight flickering behind her, the forest breathing slowly in the dark. Her sketchbook lay open in her lap, pages filled with drawings of water and rock and light. And one question pulsed at the back of her mind: what stories had been written here long before they arrived? She remembered how Myra had said the place had saved her. Now Lyra wondered, saved her from what? But she didn't ask. Not yet. There was something sacred in not knowing everything at once. Instead, she looked up at the stars so clear and close out here, away from city lights, and felt a peace so deep, it scared her. Because when you've been hollow for so long, fullness feels overwhelming. The next morning, Lyra woke earlier than she intended. The forest was still misty, tendrils of fog rising from the grass like spirits stretching after sleep. She wrapped herself in a shawl and stepped outside barefoot, dew chilling her toes. Drawn by instinct, she returned to the sketch of the spiral. She flipped the page and began writing beside it. Maybe the spiral isn't a symbol of time passing. Maybe it's a reminder that time returns. That everything we lose finds its way back. If we're still enough to hear it coming. As she finished the last line, a single feather drifted from the sky and landed beside her sketchbook. She didn't know what kind of bird it had come from, but she took it as a sign. The quarry was calling again. And Lyra was ready to listen. Chapter 5, The Echoes Beneath the Surface. The path to the secret quarry felt different the next day. Not physically, each step still passed beneath whispering trees, the same ivy-laced gate still marking the entrance like an invitation carved by time, but something had shifted. The air buzzed with quiet urgency, as though the place itself had sensed Lyra's return before she even stepped into the clearing. She had left Myra at the cottage that morning, claiming she needed solitude to sketch. But the truth was more complex. She couldn't stop thinking about the carvings. The initials. The spiral. The way the water had held her as though it knew every crack in her soul and filled them in with stillness. Last night's dreams had been vivid, and strange faces she didn't recognize, laughter echoing across stone walls, symbols she couldn't decipher swirling in and out of sight. And always, that spiral. So she returned, alone. This time, she carried more than her sketchbook. Wrapped in a soft linen pouch inside her backpack was a small wooden box, worn and weathered, no bigger than her palm. It was a relic of her past, something she hadn't touched in years, a keepsake of her mother. Lyra didn't know why she brought it. Only that something told her it belonged here. The quarry greeted her like an old friend. Mist still clung to the water's surface, and the morning sun had only just begun to melt it away. The rocks were cool beneath her sandals, and a breeze rustled the canopy above, sending shafts of light rippling across the stone basin. She sat at the water's edge and let herself really breathe without any pressure to be anything but still. Then, slowly, she took out the box. It had been her mother's traveling talisman, carried in purses, kept in bedside drawers, never opened in front of Lyra until the week she passed. Inside were fragments, a pressed daisy, a tiny silver key, a folded paper with a single word "return" written in her mother's unmistakable hand. Lyra had never deciphered the meaning. Until now. She pressed the box against her heart and whispered, "I'm here." As if in answer, a ripple stirred the water. Lyra blinked and turned. The surface was smooth again, but something had changed. The light shimmered differently, refracted more deeply, like there was something beneath. Something waiting. She stood and stepped into the shallows, letting the chill climb her legs, her breath catching at the contrast between sunlight and water. Then, without hesitation, she dove. The water enveloped her instantly, and the world above disappeared. Unlike the playful splashing of the day before, this dive felt solemn. Intentional. She swam deeper, eyes open, vision clouded only slightly by bubbles and light. The bottom came slowly into view, rocky, uneven, but peaceful. And there, carved into a smooth slab near the base of one wall, was another spiral. Larger than the one above. Deeper etched. Almost glowing in the filtered light. Lyra froze. She swam closer, heart pounding. There were symbols around the spiral, some familiar, others abstract. Constellation shapes. Arrows. A crescent moon. And words in a language she didn't recognize but somehow understood. Where memory lingers, the soul returns. In stillness, you will remember. Her lungs burned. She pushed off the stone and rose toward the surface. Breaking through, she gasped and clung to the edge of the quarry, blinking water from her eyes. Her heart thundered, not from lack of air, but from knowing. The spiral wasn't just a symbol. It was a doorway. A memory. A promise. She floated on her back, letting the water cradle her as thoughts flooded in. Her mother had always believed in energy, in sacred spaces, in the stories held by land and water. And now Lyra felt it too, the echo of something ancient that wasn't quite dead, only dormant. She stayed there for a long while, watching birds wheel overhead and shadows drift across the surface. When she finally climbed out, her limbs were trembling, not with fear, but release. Back on the sun-warmed stone, she unwrapped the wooden box once more. This time, she opened it slowly and took out the piece of paper. Return. Maybe it wasn't about going backward, she thought. Maybe it meant returning to yourself. To stillness. To truth. She added her own mark to the stone wall, not with a knife or pen, but with a small piece of charcoal from her sketch kit. A spiral. Next to it, she wrote, "I was lost. Now I listen." As the sun rose higher and the mist vanished completely, Lyra lay down again on the smooth rock and closed her eyes. She felt the water inside her still moving, even as she dried. The spiral remained. Not just beneath the surface of the quarry, but within her. Chapter 6, A Trail of Whispers and Wonder. The next morning, the weather was perfect. The kind of day that seems handpicked by the universe to be remembered, a sky so blue it looked like polished glass, the breeze gentle and warm, the light golden and slow to rise over the treetops. Lyra had barely finished her morning coffee when Myra handed her a folded piece of paper with a sly smile. "I told you," Myra said, leaning against the porch railing, "there's more. You've only seen the surface." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "More spirals." Myra chuckled. "Something better. A map." The paper was hand-drawn in Myra's careful penmanship, faint lines, arrows, a few cryptic symbols, and a small sketch of the quarry pool at the center. But what intrigued Lyra most were the margins, where Myra had scrawled strange notes like, "Find the red sentinel. Past the roots that breathe. The ones who watch will guide you." It was a treasure map. But not for gold. For memory. For meaning. And Lyra, with her heart still humming from yesterday's plunge into mystery, was ready to follow. She packed a small satchel with her sketchbook, a bottle of water, and the wooden box that still seemed to radiate quiet energy. Myra waved her off with a wink. "No spoilers," she said. "But keep your eyes open." The trail began as expected, back through the now familiar path into the quarry clearing. The morning sun glinted off the water, and the spiral she had drawn with charcoal still lingered faintly on the stone. It felt like a silent pact had been made between her and the place. But instead of settling into the usual spot, she turned left, climbing a ridge Myra had once warned was too slippery. Today, curiosity overpowered caution. The air changed as she ascended. The breeze grew cooler, more fragrant herbs and pine and something deeper, like earth after rain. The trees here were older, thicker, their roots breaking through stone like veins of something alive. She reached the top of the ridge, panting slightly, and found the first clue. A tree stood alone at the crest. A towering red oak, its bark darker than the others, almost crimson. A single piece of red cloth had been tied to one of its branches, fluttering lazily in the breeze. The red sentinel. She approached and ran her fingers along the bark. It was warm. Familiar. Like it had known her once and was happy she returned. Beneath its roots, the soil dipped into a narrow tunnel barely large enough for her to duck through. She hesitated, then crawled in. The tunnel wasn't long, just a few meters, but as she emerged into the small glade on the other side, Lyra felt like she had crossed into another world. Sunlight spilled in strange patterns here, filtered through thick canopies of oak and ash. The air buzzed gently, and the silence was full, not empty, but alive. A cluster of stones stood at the glade's center. Not random. Arranged. There were 5 in total, forming a rough circle. Each was carved with an unfamiliar symbol: a crescent moon, a flame, a spiral, a leaf, and a bird in flight. She stepped into the circle and felt the shift immediately. Like being watched. Not with menace, but with reverence. Lyra's fingers twitched with the urge to draw. She pulled out her sketchbook and captured the symbols, each line clear and bold. As she did, she noticed something etched into the center of the circle. "Look where the watchers dwell." Her eyes rose instinctively to the trees. And there they were. High in the branches, hidden but unmistakable, were small wooden figures. Tiny guardians carved crudely from bark and twine, nestled in notches of branches. Some hung from strings. Others sat wedged in crooks. Their faces were blank, but their posture almost human. Watching. The ones who watch. She followed their gaze, tracing where each figure looked until she saw it half concealed by brush and ivy, a weathered stone archway, barely standing. Its keystone bore the spiral once more. And beyond it nothing but shadow and dense forest. Her heart pounded not with fear, but recognition. The spiral was no longer just a symbol. It was a path. A recurring invitation. A language the land used to speak to those who could feel, not just see. She stepped through the archway, bracing for a sudden change. And it came. The forest beyond was thicker, older still. Vines coiled like serpents across ancient trunks. Mushrooms glowed faintly at the base of trees, and the light seemed to bend oddly, more golden, more dreamlike. The trail dipped and rose, twisted through brambles, then opened once more. A second quarry. Smaller. Hidden. The water here was darker, tinged green, with lily pads floating like lazy sentinels. The rock walls were closer, more intimate. And the carvings, they were everywhere. Thousands. All across the stone, layer upon layer, some fresh, others ancient. Names. Phrases. Symbols. Spirals upon spirals, some as small as coins, others spanning entire slabs. It was a cathedral of memory. And Lyra felt her breath catch in awe. She knelt by the water's edge and dipped her fingers in. Warm. Alive. She didn't dive this time. She just sat and listened. And the echoes came. Voices, not in words, but in feelings. Bursts of laughter. Whispers of promises. Songs without melody. 1,000 lives layered into one still place. She pressed her hand to the rock wall and felt it hum beneath her skin. This was the heart of it. The center. The memory not only of the land but of every soul it had healed. Chapter 7, The House Time Forgot. The sun was beginning to lower by the time Lyra retraced her steps back through the archway, down the spiral path, and into the woods once more. But something in her had shifted, subtle, but permanent. As if the carvings she had touched, the water she had heard breathe, had passed something unseen into her. There was a restlessness in her now. Not anxiety, but a pull. Like her soul had remembered something her body had forgotten. Instead of heading home to Myra's cottage, Lyra chose a different trail, one she had noticed but hadn't taken. A deer path, narrow and overgrown, splitting from the main trail like a secret whispered too softly for most to hear. She followed it, heart thudding quietly with anticipation. The woods here thickened. Branches hung lower, veils of moss cloaked fallen trees, and the air grew cooler. The soundscape shifted, no birds, only the hush of wind and the occasional creak of bark stretching toward dusk. Then, through the trees, it appeared. A house. Or what was left of one. Stone walls still stood, choked by ivy and lichen, the roof long since fallen in. Windows gaped like hollow eyes, and the front porch sagged with the weight of 100 forgotten seasons. The door, slightly ajar, groaned softly in the breeze as if exhaling after a long, tired slumber. Lyra approached with careful steps, the crunch of leaves beneath her solace impossibly loud in the stillness. She didn't know why, but the moment she saw it, she knew this was the old stone house Myra had once mentioned in passing. The one said to have belonged to the original owner of the quarry. No one knew his name now. No one cared. Time had swept the details away like dust, leaving only fragments behind. Lyra stepped inside. The air was stale but not unpleasant. It smelled like age and earth and something that might have been perfume once, long ago. The walls still bore faded wallpaper, once floral, now ghostly outlines of vines and petals. A hearth stood in the corner, its stones blackened with soot, and above it hung the remnants of a painting, edges curled, canvas torn. She moved room to room, her footsteps tentative but steady. The house felt suspended, as if it had been paused in the moment just before it was truly abandoned. She found an old piano in what might have once been a parlor. Its keys were yellowed, some missing, others covered in moss. She pressed one gently. A low, broken note echoed, like a sigh from the past. In another room, perhaps a library, books lay scattered across the floor. Most were too decayed to read, but one, half buried beneath leaves, caught her eye. She picked it up carefully. The cover was worn leather, cracked but intact. Inside, in faded ink, was a name. Thomas Whitrow, 1883. She froze. T. W. Her mind flashed back to the heart she had seen carved on the stone, T. W. plus E. R. She flipped through the pages. It wasn't a novel or a diary, more like a collection of field notes. Observations of local flora. Sketches of birds. Water levels in the quarry across different seasons. But near the middle, a page had been starred with ink. And beneath it, a single line. She told me the water remembers. Lyra stared at it, breath caught in her chest. Who was she? E.R. Ellie rose. Was it possible? The story was emerging, fragmented, incomplete but real. A man and a woman. The quarry. A memory. And now, her. She tucked the book into her satchel and moved to the back of the house, where the kitchen had been. Vines spilled through the windows here, reclaiming cabinets and counters alike. On the floor, beneath a broken chair, she saw something glint. A ring. Thin. Silver. Simple. She picked it up. Inside the band, in the tiniest etching, were the words. Return, Ellie. Lyra's heart thudded once. Then again. Return. The same word her mother had written. She sank to the floor, clutching the ring, the book, the weight of connection folding over her like a wave. This wasn't just a house. It was a node, part of the spiral. A turning point. A memory embedded so deep into the land that even time couldn't erode it fully. She stayed until the light faded completely. Only when the moon began to rise through the trees did she finally step back outside, the silver ring tucked in her pocket, the journal tight against her chest. And there, under the moonlight, she whispered, I remember. She didn't know exactly what she meant. But the trees seemed to nod. And the house didn't groan as she left. Chapter 8, The Gate Between Worlds. The night was quiet when Lyra returned to the path. Her steps were slower now, not from exhaustion, but from something heavier, the feeling of having brushed against a story far older than herself. The journal in her satchel thumped lightly against her hip as she walked, each tap a heartbeat from the past. The forest around her seemed deeper in shadow. The moon had risen, full and pale, caught between the bare branches above like a watchful eye. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The silence, once eerie, now felt reverent. The land was listening. And she was learning to listen back. She made her way down the narrow trail Myra had once casually pointed to but never followed. It leads to what's left of the old access road, Myra had said with a shrug, nothing but overgrowth now. But Myra had known. She had always known. Lyra passed a leaning stone marker, half buried beneath moss. It had once been carved, perhaps with a name or symbol, but time had worn it smooth. She touched it briefly, whispered a thank you, and moved on. And then she saw it. A gate. At first glance, it seemed like nothing. Two rusted posts, leaning outward as if bowing to each other, connected by a long-forgotten iron arch, twisted with vines. One hinge remained, crooked and broken. The other dangled like a tired arm, the remnants of a chain still coiled at its base. Nature had tried to reclaim it, but something about the gate resisted. The grass around it was taller, greener. Wildflowers bloomed in neat clusters, as though someone had once planted them with care. And there, just above the arch, was a shape barely visible beneath years of rust. A spiral. Of course. Lyra stepped closer, her hand reaching for the frame. It was colder than the evening air. The metal pulsed faintly beneath her fingers, not hot, not electric, but alive. She stepped through. The shift was immediate. The air changed. She didn't cross into another realm, not exactly. But something old stirred. As if she had passed through an invisible veil where memory lingered thick in the air, like mist rising from the ground. Her breath hitched in her throat. The path beyond the gate was unlike any she'd walked before. The grass grew wild here, taller than her knees, but soft, inviting. Flowers she didn't recognize nodded in the breeze. The trees arched above her, forming a natural corridor. Some had symbols carved into their bark, spirals, moons, waves. Others bore small offerings tied to their branches, ribbons, feathers, fragments of poems on weather-worn parchment. Lyra paused beside one of the trees and read a note fluttering from a string. For the one I lost. I hope you still dream in colors. She swallowed. She didn't know why, but tears welled up. The deeper she walked, the more she felt them, the ones who came before. Their laughter lived in the breeze, their secrets in the soil. She imagined young lovers stealing away in twilight, old souls finding peace in stillness, artists sketching under golden light, poets whispering lines to the trees. Each step felt like walking through a sacred archive. She turned a bend in the path and stopped. Before her, in a shallow hollow surrounded by trees, stood a circle of stones. Larger than the one she had seen before. Each stone bore a name, some still legible, some worn down to nothing. Candles, long extinguished, sat in niches. The grass in the center was pressed flat, as though many feet had knelt there. A gathering place. A remembering place. At the far end of the circle stood a single wooden bench, half covered in moss. On it, carved carefully by hand, were the words, "Here we return. Here we remain." Lyra sat, letting her hands rest on the wood, her gaze scanning the circle slowly. Her fingers found a crack between two planks, something hidden. She reached inside and pulled out a folded paper, yellowed and delicate. She opened it with care. There were only 5 words, written in flowing ink. Ask the quarry what it knows. She clutched the note to her chest. Everything pointed back to the water. To the place where memory echoed loudest. She stood and turned to leave, but as she did, Her foot brushed something in the grass. Another offering. A small bundle of dried lavender tied with twine. Her mother had loved lavender. Lyra knelt and picked it up slowly, inhaling the familiar scent. The sensation was overwhelming, like being 10 years old again, lying in bed while her mother tucked sprigs into her pillowcase, whispering, "Sleep easy, my love. The earth holds you." The spiral wasn't just a symbol. It was a pattern of return. Of finding again what had once been lost. She placed the lavender in her bag, her heart heavy with memory but light with meaning. The gate waited behind her. And as she stepped back through, the world seemed to exhale. The night air returned to its normal chill. The breeze carried cricket song once more. But nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 9, The Waters That Remember. The forest was still, but Lyra could feel it, an anticipation hanging in the air, thick like fog. She had been here before, but this time, the quarry felt different. The gate had opened something inside her. The memories, long buried, were now rising like the tide, silent, but insistent. And there was one place she had to return to. The pool. The water that had whispered to her in her dreams. The water that remembered. She made her way back through the woods, her feet steady, her heart a little lighter than before. The path was clear, but it felt longer this time. Every step weighted with the knowledge that the journey she had embarked on was not just about discovery. It was about reckoning. As she approached the quarry, she noticed the air had changed again. The light had softened, a golden hue hanging over the water like a veil. The silence here was deep, almost reverent, but not in the way the forest had been. This silence was ancient, like the kind you feel when standing in the presence of something timeless. She stopped at the edge of the pool and looked down into the still surface. The reflection was perfect, unmarred by wind or wave. The water was a mirror of the sky, but beneath that surface, she could see something else, something calling to her. Lyra took a deep breath and slowly stepped into the water, her feet sinking into the coolness. The sensation was familiar, comforting, and yet something inside her trembled with anticipation. She waded deeper, the water rising to her knees, then to her waist. She could feel the weight of it, as if the water itself were holding her in place. And then, without warning, the surface of the water began to ripple, as if something beneath had stirred. Lyra closed her eyes and let herself sink further, the water now up to her chest. She felt a presence, a pull, an invitation. She opened her eyes, and the surface of the pool shimmered with a strange light, brighter than it should have been. The air around her thickened, and her heartbeat quickened. The water was speaking. It wasn't with words, but with images, feelings, fragments of memories, like broken glass caught in the reflection. She saw flashes of faces, some familiar, others unknown. She saw the carvings in the stone walls, the spirals, the names. She saw the red oak tree, the one with the cloth tied to its branch. And then, she saw the house, the crumbling walls, the broken piano, the journals filled with half-remembered words. And then him. A man, standing at the edge of the pool. His face was blurred, as if the water itself was unwilling to reveal his identity fully. But she could feel him, his presence. He was connected to everything here. To the stone, to the spiral, to the water. To her. I never left, the voice echoed in her mind. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it resonated through her being, as if the water had absorbed it over time, waiting for her to hear it. I am here. Waiting. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She turned her head, but there was no one there, just the quiet ripples in the water, the reflections of trees and sky. She stepped deeper, almost losing herself in the pull of it. Who are you? She whispered aloud, her voice a tremor in the stillness. The water responded. Images flashed quick, frantic, and then, at last, one clear vision, a name. Thomas Whitrow. The same name as the journal. The same initials. T. W. He was the one who remained. Lyra's hands gripped the stone ledge as she tried to steady herself, the weight of the revelation pressing down on her. This was not just a memory. This was something more. Thomas Whitrow had been here before. He had carved his name into the stone, into the water, into the very fabric of this place. And now, through the water, he was reaching out. You are not alone, the voice whispered again, and this time, it was softer, closer. The story has not finished. You are part of it now. The water began to move, slow and deliberate. The ripples spread outward, swirling in a pattern that seemed to form a circle, a spiral. The light from the sun caught on the surface, casting a golden glow across the water. Lyra felt her body lean forward, as if the water itself were inviting her to step further in, deeper, until there was no distinction between where she ended and the water began. And then, something broke the surface. A hand. Not a physical hand, but a presence, a sensation of a hand reaching through the veil between worlds. Lyra's breath stopped, and she stretched her own hand toward it, not in fear, but in recognition. She was not alone. With a sudden rush, the water surged, and Lyra found herself pulled under. But this time, it was not panic or fear. It was a gentle embrace, as if the water itself were cradling her. The weight of it, the depth of it, it was comforting, like being held by something ancient and wise. She sank, deeper and deeper, until the light around her dimmed. But instead of panic, she felt calm. Peace. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the pull was gone. Lyra gasped as she broke the surface, coughing, blinking water from her eyes. Her hands gripped the stone ledge once more, and she pulled herself out of the water, her body trembling but alive with something new. The water was still. And yet, she knew. She had touched something beyond herself. And the story, the one that had started with the spiral, was far from over. Chapter 10, The Memory That Lingers. Lyra had never felt this alive, this open. The water had revealed something in her. Something she hadn't even known was missing. There was a stillness that clung to her skin, like the water itself had become a part of her. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It was about everything that had brought her here, the symbols, the carvings, the spirals that seemed to follow her everywhere. As she stepped away from the quarry, the last echoes of the water's whispers still hummed in her chest. She felt its call not as a thing to be feared, but as a thing that had always been waiting for her to hear it. But there was more to uncover. The water had shown her one piece, but there were still pieces missing. The journal. The house. The names carved into the stone. It all pointed to something greater, something unfinished. Myra would know. She had to. Lyra didn't wait for the sun to fully set. She gathered the things she needed, her sketchbook, the journal, and the silver ring, and set out toward Myra's cottage. The path was familiar now, but tonight, it felt different. The trees around her seemed to stand a little taller, the wind a little colder. It was as if the world had noticed her change. When she arrived at the cottage, Myra was sitting on the porch, her feet bare and her face lit by the soft glow of a lantern. She had known Lyra would come. "You've been to the quarry again," Myra said, her voice calm, as if she had been waiting for this moment. She didn't ask any questions. She already knew. Lyra nodded. "I need to know more. About Thomas Whitrow. About Ellie Rose. About the spiral." Myra's eyes softened. "I thought you might." She stood and walked to a nearby table, pulling out a small wooden box. The kind of box you'd keep something precious in. She placed it in front of Lyra and opened it slowly. Inside, nestled in a velvet lining, were several old photographs and a few faded letters. The first photograph was of a man, Thomas Whitrow. His face was familiar, though she didn't recognize him from the vision in the water. He had dark hair, kind eyes, and a smile that seemed to belong to someone who had seen too much but still believed in beauty. "Thomas was my great-grandfather," Myra said softly, her fingers brushing over the photo. "He was the one who found the quarry. He was the one who believed it held power. And he was the one who tried to protect it." Lyra's heart skipped. She glanced at Myra, unsure of what she was hearing. "Protected from what?" "From the world," Myra replied quietly. "From those who would take it. But also, from itself." She paused and picked up a faded letter, unfolding it gently. This letter was written the night he died. It's the last thing he ever wrote. He knew something was coming. Something that had been waiting for a long time. Myra handed the letter to Lyra, and she read the words carefully, her eyes scanning the faded ink. "The water remembers. It has always remembered. The spiral is the key. It is not just a symbol, it is a doorway. It will open when the time is right, when the one who belongs steps forward. I am not the one who will unlock it, but she is. Lyra's hands trembled as she read. She is. It wasn't just a memory. It was a message to her. She looked up at Myra, who was watching her closely. He knew you would come, Lyra, Myra said softly. And he knew that you would understand. Lyra's heart raced. What do I need to do? Myra stood, walking to the edge of the porch. You need to return to the quarry. But this time, you must ask the water directly. Ask it what it has been waiting to tell you. Lyra stood, her mind racing. What happens after that? Only you can answer that, Myra said, her voice a whisper on the wind. The spiral is not just a path to the past. It is a path to the future. But it can only be unlocked by you. Lyra's hand clenched around the silver ring, the same ring she had found at the abandoned house. She felt the weight of it, like the past was pressing against her chest, urging her to move forward. The night was waiting. And Lyra was ready. Chapter 11, The Spiral Unveiled. The moon hung low, casting a silvery glow over the quiet clearing. The forest around Lyra was alive with the sound of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves, but there was an overwhelming stillness in the air, as though the world was holding its breath. Lyra stood at the edge of the quarry once more, the journal clutched tightly in her hands. The silver ring was nestled in her pocket, the weight of it like a promise, a secret that was almost too heavy to bear. She had asked the water, as Myra had told her. She had listened, and it had answered. Now, she was here, ready to face the final step of her journey. The quarry felt different tonight. The water was still, almost unnaturally so, like a perfect mirror reflecting the night sky. But beneath the surface, Lyra could feel it something waiting. The same pull she had felt before, only stronger now, deeper, like the water itself was calling her name. She stepped forward, her feet sinking into the cool mud. The ripples in the water seemed to stretch toward her, as though the lake itself were reaching out. It was time. Lyra closed her eyes, letting the coolness of the water rise up around her legs, her heart racing in anticipation. She thought of the spiral. The symbol that had haunted her thoughts since she first saw it carved into the stones, since it had appeared in her dreams. She thought of Thomas Whitrow, and the words he had left behind, the spiral is the key. But to unlock it, she had to be more than just a passive observer. She had to become a part of it. She took a deep breath and stepped further into the water, letting it rise to her waist. The coolness enveloped her, and for a moment, she felt weightless, like she was floating in another world, suspended between time. The moonlight hit the water in a way that illuminated the surface, casting long shadows across the stones. Lyra closed her eyes once more and whispered, "I'm ready." The answer came not as a voice, but as a feeling. A vibration deep within the earth, a shift in the very air around her. The spiral. She opened her eyes, and the water in front of her began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, swirling like a whirlpool, but there was no danger, no threat. Instead, it was mesmerizing, like a dance. The light above seemed to bend and shift, and Lyra felt herself drawn into it, her heart in sync with the rhythm of the water. And then, the surface broke. A single figure emerged, rising from the water, its shape both familiar and otherworldly. It was Thomas Whitrow, his face clearer now than in the fleeting visions she had seen before. But this time, it wasn't just his image she saw, it was his soul, his presence, his very being, wrapped in the energy of the quarry, the water, the spiral. He stepped forward, his feet barely disturbing the surface of the water. His eyes were full of sorrow, but also something else, hope, understanding. "You've come," he said, his voice gentle but filled with power. "I have been waiting." Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. "Waiting? For me?" Thomas nodded. "Yes. For you. For the one who would unlock the spiral, the one who would return what was lost." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. What is the spiral? What does it all mean? Thomas's eyes grew distant for a moment, as though he were recalling something long buried. "The spiral is a path, a cycle that binds us all. It holds the memories of those who came before us, and those who will come after. It is not just a symbol, but a part of the earth itself, of the water, the stone, the trees, and the sky. It holds the stories of the world." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. "But it is also a warning. A reminder that everything must return to the earth, to the water, to the spiral. The memories, the love, the pain, everything comes full circle. And when the time comes, someone must carry it forward." Lyra's eyes widened, the weight of his words settling over her. "I don't understand." "You will," Thomas said, his voice soft but firm. "The water has shown you what you need to know. Now, you must take the next step. You must carry the memories forward, for they are yours to protect. For you are part of this cycle, Lyra. The spiral chose you." The water around her began to swirl again, the surface turning turbulent. She felt a sudden rush of energy, as though the very earth beneath her was awakening. The spiral had always been with her, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the one who would carry its weight. And now, that moment had arrived. Lyra looked at Thomas, and for the first time, she understood. She was not just a witness. She was a part of the story. She was the one who would carry it forward, who would protect the memories of the earth and the water. "You're not alone," Thomas said, his voice barely a whisper now, as he began to fade into the water once more. "Remember who you are." And with that, he was gone. Lyra stood alone in the stillness of the quarry, the ripples in the water the only sign that something had changed. The moonlight reflected off the surface, and for a moment, everything felt right, balanced, whole. She had crossed the threshold. The spiral had been unlocked. Chapter 12, A New Dawn. Lyra awoke to the soft chirping of birds outside her window, the kind of sound that once felt like a simple greeting from the world to a new day. But this morning, the melody seemed distant, unfamiliar. Her thoughts were still tangled in the memories of the night before, of the water, the spiral, and the fleeting appearance of Thomas Whitrow. The weight of his final words echoed in her mind. "Remember who you are." She sat up slowly, the morning light casting long shadows across the room. The journal and the silver ring were on her bedside table, as if waiting. Everything felt strangely still, as though the world itself had paused for a moment to give her space. But Lyra knew that stillness wouldn't last. The night before had changed something in her, something deep. She could feel it in the way her heart beat, in the way her hands now moved with more purpose, more confidence. She had never felt this connected to the earth, to the water, to the world around her. It was as if she had become a part of something much larger than herself, a cycle, a rhythm that she was now meant to protect. But how? How could she fulfill the role Thomas had alluded to? How could she protect the memories, the spiral, the stories? She walked to the window and looked out over the quiet forest. The trees stood tall, their branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. The world seemed unchanged, and yet, she knew it wasn't. She wasn't the same person who had walked into the woods days ago. Her hand instinctively reached for the silver ring in her pocket. The same ring she had found in the abandoned house. The same ring that had tied her to Thomas and Ellie Rose, to the quarry, to the spiral. The weight of it was comforting, like a promise. But what did it mean? She took a deep breath and grabbed her coat, stepping outside into the cool morning air. There was no turning back now. The answers were still out there, hidden in the depths of the quarry, in the memories that the water had kept for so long. She had to return. But this time, it would be different. She would go with purpose. Myra's cottage was quiet when she arrived. The door was slightly ajar, and she knocked gently, pushing it open to find Myra sitting at the table, a cup of tea in front of her. Her eyes met Lyra's, and for a brief moment, there was an understanding between them, something unspoken but clear. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Myra asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Lyra nodded. "I've seen it. The spiral, the water, Thomas. It's all connected." Myra smiled faintly. "I knew it would be you. The water chose you. I'm just glad you're ready." Lyra sat down across from her, the journal and ring resting on the table between them. "But what now? What do I do with this? With all of this?" Myra took a deep breath and looked out the window, as though searching for something in the trees. The spiral is more than just a path to the past. It's a living thing, a force that carries memory and time. It has to be protected, Lyra. And that's where you come in. But how? Lyra's voice was thick with doubt. How can I protect something like this? I'm just me. You are more than you think, Myra replied, her gaze steady. You've already been chosen. The water, the spiral, the land, they all recognize you now. The key is in you, Lyra. The ring, the journal, they're just reminders of what you've always known. Lyra's heart raced. But what about Thomas? What about the others who were here before me? They're gone, Myra said softly. But their story isn't over. The memories, the spiral, they'll live on as long as someone is here to protect them. Lyra looked down at the journal, her fingers brushing the pages. I'm not sure I can do this. You can, Myra said firmly. Because it's not just about protecting the spiral. It's about remembering. You have the power to bring those memories to life, to share them with the world. But you must do it with love, with respect for the earth and the water. They are the ones who have held the stories all along. Lyra stared at the journal in her hands, the weight of it sinking in. It wasn't just a book. It was a map, a guide to the memories of the world, to the hidden stories that had been waiting for someone to listen. Her hand reached for the silver ring again, the cool metal warming under her touch. She had been given a gift, a responsibility. And she couldn't turn her back on it now. I'm ready, she whispered, more to herself than to Myra. Myra smiled, her eyes gleaming with something ancient and wise. I knew you would be. Now, go. The spiral awaits. Lyra stood, the journal and ring in her hands. She felt something stir deep within her, a current she hadn't known existed. The water, the land, the memories, they were all calling to her. And she was ready to answer. Chapter 13, The Path Ahead. Lyra stood at the edge of the forest, the weight of the journal in her hands heavier than before. The silver ring was now securely placed on her finger, and the cool metal felt like an extension of her very being. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a key. A reminder. A symbol of the responsibility she had inherited. The world before her felt vast and full of unknowns. She knew what she had to do, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the journey she was about to embark on would take her places she couldn't yet imagine. Myra had given her a map, an old, faded piece of parchment with markings and symbols that seemed to shift and change every time she looked at them. It wasn't a traditional map. It was something deeper, like a guide to understanding the land and the hidden memories it held. The map was not only a path to follow but a tool to help her unlock the stories that had been buried in the earth for centuries. Lyra took a deep breath and started walking, the map folded carefully in her pocket. The forest around her felt different now, as if it recognized her presence. The trees seemed to part for her as she moved, their branches reaching overhead like protective arms. As she walked, Lyra's thoughts kept drifting back to the water. The way it had responded to her, how the water had called to her and shown her glimpses of Thomas, of Ellie Rose, and of the spiral. She had felt something stir within her when she had entered the quarry, a sense of connection to something far greater than herself. But the memories were fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle that she still needed to put together. She needed to understand more about the spiral, about what Thomas had left behind, and why he had spoken of the water as if it were alive. And most importantly, she needed to find out how she fit into all of this. The path led her deeper into the woods, the trees growing taller, their trunks thicker, their bark rough and aged. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. She could hear the distant sound of running water, the same sound that had drawn her to the quarry in the first place. She followed it, trusting the instinct that had guided her so far. After what felt like hours, the path opened up to a small clearing, and in the center of it stood a stone circle. The stones were weathered, their surfaces worn smooth by time and the elements. They were arranged in a perfect circle, and Lyra could see that some of them had symbols carved into them, symbols she recognized from the journal. She stepped into the circle, her heart racing. The stones seemed to hum with energy, their presence both grounding and uplifting at the same time. She placed her hand on one of the stones, feeling its cool surface beneath her fingers. And then she saw it. A vision, clear and vivid, unfolded in her mind. She saw Thomas, standing in the center of a similar stone circle, his face filled with determination. He was speaking to someone, but the words were too faint to hear. She saw him looking down at the ground, at the spiral etched into the earth, and then his face turned to hers. "You have to understand," his voice echoed in her mind, "the spiral is not just a symbol of the past. It's a bridge to the future. It connects us all. If you can unlock it, you will change everything." The vision faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Lyra breathless and uncertain. She stumbled back, her hand still on the stone, her mind spinning with the weight of the message. The spiral was more than just a path. It was a gateway, an interconnected thread that tied the past, present, and future together. And Lyra had a part to play in it. She looked around the stone circle, her gaze falling on the markings. Each one seemed to tell a story, a piece of the puzzle that she had yet to solve. There was so much she still didn't understand, but one thing was clear: the water, the spiral, and the memories, they were all part of something bigger than herself. Lyra took another deep breath and closed her eyes, reaching out to the energy of the stones. The wind had picked up, swirling around her in a gentle breeze. She felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she also felt the strength within herself, the strength that had been awakened by the water. "I'm ready," she whispered, the words carrying on the wind. The stones seemed to respond. The ground beneath her feet rumbled softly, as though the earth itself was acknowledging her presence. She opened her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. The journey was just beginning. And she knew that the answers she sought were not far from reach. The spiral would guide her, just as it had guided those who had come before her. Chapter 14, The Threshold of Secrets. The air was thick with a kind of tension as Lyra walked deeper into the forest, the stone circle still fresh in her mind. The symbols etched into the stone seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. She felt their presence, calling to her, guiding her towards something she was destined to find. But what? Every step she took seemed to lead her further away from what she thought she knew and closer to something unknown. The journey had started with a simple curiosity about a forgotten place in the woods, but now, it was clear that Lyra was part of a much larger story. She was connected to something far greater than herself, a force that had been waiting for the right person to step forward and unlock its power. The journal, the ring, the water, the spiral, they were all parts of the same puzzle, and Lyra could feel the pieces slowly falling into place. But there were still so many unanswered questions, so many things she didn't understand. What did Thomas Whitrow mean when he said the spiral was a bridge to the future? What was the role of the water, the memories, and the ancient forces that seemed to be guiding her? And most importantly, what was she supposed to do with all this power? Her thoughts were interrupted as the path ahead of her began to narrow. The trees here grew even taller, their trunks thick and gnarled, their branches twisting together like the arms of an ancient guardian. The air felt heavier, as though the forest was holding its breath, waiting for her to take the next step. And then, she saw it. A door. Not a real door, but a passage, an opening in the trees that led into a small, hidden grove. The trees arched above her like a canopy, their leaves shimmering with an ethereal glow. The ground beneath her feet was soft, covered in a carpet of moss and fallen leaves. The air smelled sweet, like jasmine and cedar, and the silence here was profound, almost sacred. Lyra stepped forward, her heart racing. She didn't know why, but she felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity with this place. Like she had been here before, in another life, in another time. As she entered the grove, she saw it a stone archway, tall and weathered, its surface carved with intricate symbols. The arch seemed to glow with an inner light, and Lyra could feel its power as she approached. It was the same symbol she had seen in the water, the one she had seen etched into the stones in the quarry. The spiral. It was everywhere now. In the trees, in the air, in the very ground beneath her feet. The spiral had been calling to her from the beginning, and now, it seemed to be opening up before her, revealing a path that had always been there. She stepped through the archway, her breath catching in her chest. The moment she crossed the threshold, the world around her seemed to shift. The air grew colder, and the light dimmed. She could hear a faint whisper, like voices calling to her from the depths of the earth. Lyra. The voice was soft, distant, but unmistakable. It was a voice she knew, a voice that had been with her since the beginning. Thomas. She whispered, her voice trembling with uncertainty. The air around her seemed to vibrate with the sound of his name. The whisper grew louder, more urgent. "You are ready," the voice said. "You must open the door." Lyra's heart raced. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble, and the symbols carved into the stone archway glowed brighter, their edges shifting like liquid. The whisper became a roar, filling her mind with images of the water, of the spiral, of Thomas standing at the edge of the quarry, waiting for her. "You must choose," the voice said again, louder now. "The path of memory, or the path of the future. The spiral holds both." Lyra's head spun. What did it mean? How could she choose between the past and the future? Were they separate paths? Or were they two sides of the same coin? The world around her seemed to close in, the air thick with the weight of the decision she had to make. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel the power of the spiral calling to her, urging her to step forward. And then, she understood. The choice wasn't about picking one or the other. It was about finding the balance. The past and the future were not separate. They were intertwined, connected by the spiral. By the memories of those who had come before, and by the future that awaited. Lyra reached out, her hand brushing against the stone arch. The moment her fingers touched the cool surface, the archway flared with light, and the world around her dissolved. She was no longer in the grove. She was somewhere else, somewhere between time and space, between the past and the future. The air here was different, heavy with the weight of ages. The ground beneath her feet was soft, like moss, and the sky above her was filled with swirling stars. She could hear the sound of rushing water in the distance, and the faint hum of something ancient, something powerful. And in the distance, she saw him. Thomas. He was standing at the edge of a vast, glowing pool, the water shimmering with the same light that filled the sky. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, everything else faded away. "It's time," he said, his voice clear and strong. "The spiral is ready. You are ready." Lyra stepped forward, the weight of the world on her shoulders, but the strength of the spiral guiding her. And she understood. This was her path. She wasn't just a part of the story. She was the key. Chapter 15, The Waters That Bind. Lyra stood at the edge of the glowing pool, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The vast, otherworldly landscape stretched out before her, the air thick with power. The stars twinkled in strange constellations above, their light casting an ethereal glow on the water below. It felt like she had stepped into a place between worlds, neither fully the past, nor completely the future. A realm that existed outside of time. And yet, it was here that everything had come to a head. Thomas Whitrow stood by the pool, his presence calm, but filled with an intensity that matched the weight of the moment. He looked at her with an expression of knowing, as if he had seen all of this unfold in his mind long before she had even arrived. "It's time," he said, his voice echoing across the vast, silent expanse. Lyra took a step forward, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet, though it didn't move at all. The air around her hummed with energy, like the very fabric of reality was vibrating in response to her presence. The water before her seemed to come alive. Its surface rippled and shimmered, showing her images of things she hadn't expected to see: memories, fragments, pieces of a story that had been long buried. She saw Thomas, as a young man, standing by the same pool, looking at it with the same intensity she saw in his eyes now. He reached into the water, as if it were an extension of himself, pulling something out that seemed too ancient to comprehend. She saw Ellie Rose, a woman she had only heard about in passing, sitting by the water's edge. Her hands, though young, were calloused as though she had worked for years with the earth. She was speaking softly to the water, her voice full of sorrow but also hope. And then, there was Lyra herself. She saw herself, as a child, playing by the water's edge, laughing and running with abandon, unaware of the weight that would one day fall on her shoulders. She saw her future self, standing before the spiral, looking back toward the memories that had led her here. The vision faded, and Lyra gasped, as if coming up for air after being submerged too long. "What does it all mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with the weight of what she had just seen. Thomas didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer to her, his eyes softening with what appeared to be a mixture of pride and sorrow. "It means everything and nothing at once," he said. "The water remembers everything. It remembers those who came before, and those who will come after. It is a part of the earth, a part of the sky. The spiral is the link between all of it." "But why me?" Lyra's voice cracked. "Why am I the one who has to carry this burden?" "Because," Thomas said, his gaze never leaving hers, "the spiral chose you. It chose you because you understand. You can hear the water, feel the land beneath your feet. You are not just a part of the story, Lyra, you are the key to unlocking it." She shook her head. "But I don't know how to unlock anything. I don't even know what this all means." Thomas reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. The contact was gentle, but the force behind it was undeniable. "You don't need to know everything," he said. "Not yet. The spiral will show you. But you must be willing to listen. And you must be willing to sacrifice." Lyra felt the weight of his words settle over her like a cloak, heavy but necessary. She looked down at the silver ring on her finger, the one that had started it all. She had thought it was just a trinket, something to mark her connection to the past. But now, she knew better. It was a part of the spiral itself, a key to unlocking what had been hidden beneath the water, beneath the earth. The water, the spiral, the memories, they were all intertwined. And the key to understanding them lay in her willingness to embrace her connection to all of it. She glanced up at Thomas. "What do I have to do?" Thomas gave her a small, sad smile. "You must enter the water." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "Enter the water." Thomas nodded. "It's the only way. The water is the heart of the spiral. It will show you what you need to see. It will give you the strength to move forward. Lyra hesitated. The water before her was calm, inviting even, but she knew that what lay beneath the surface was something much deeper, much darker than she could possibly understand. But she couldn't turn back now. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her body tensing as her feet sank into the cool, clear water. The ripples spread out, distorting the reflections of the stars above. She waded deeper, feeling the water rise around her, pulling her closer to the heart of the spiral. As she stepped further, she felt a rush of energy fill her, like a current flowing through her veins. The water seemed to wrap itself around her, holding her in place. And then, everything went still. Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat as the world around her dissolved. The water became opaque, and the stars above vanished, replaced by an endless expanse of swirling light. She was no longer standing on solid ground, but floating weightless, timeless, surrounded by the water that remembered everything. She saw flashes of images, fragments of memories, pieces of the puzzle she had been searching for. She saw Thomas and Ellie Rose, working together, carving the spiral into the stone, carving their stories into the land. She saw the people who had come before, their lives intertwined with the water, with the earth, with the spiral. She saw the future, her future unfolding before her eyes, like a thread weaving through time. And in the center of it all, she saw herself. Not just as she was now, but as she could become the protector of the spiral, the keeper of the memories, the one who would carry the story forward. The water whispered in her mind. You are the bridge. Lyra felt a surge of understanding. The spiral wasn't just a path, it was a journey, a cycle that never ended. The past and the future were intertwined, and she was the key that connected them. The water had shown her the way, had shown her what she was meant to do. But now, it was up to her to carry it forward. Chapter 16, The Weight of the Spiral. Lyra opened her eyes, blinking against the glow that surrounded her. The water had faded from around her, but the light, it remained. A soft, pulsing glow that filled the space, illuminating the swirling patterns in the sky above her. The world she stood in now was like nothing she had ever seen before. It was as though she had crossed some unseen boundary, stepping into a place between places. She looked around, her heart beating heavily in her chest. The air felt alive here, charged with energy, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift and change with every step. The very earth seemed to hum with life, as if the spiral, the memories, the land itself were waking up, waiting for her to claim her role. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of soft footsteps behind her. She turned quickly, and there, standing just beyond the light, was Thomas. He had not disappeared. He had not been a dream. He was here, and he was watching her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and something deeper, something she had yet to understand. "You've done it," he said, his voice calm and steady, though it carried the weight of ages. "You've unlocked the spiral." Lyra swallowed hard, still feeling the pull of the water in her veins. "What happens now?" Her voice shook despite herself. What do I do? Thomas stepped closer, his expression softening. Now, you carry the story forward. You protect it. The spiral is not just a path, it's a living thing, a connection that binds everything together. The water, the land, the memories of those who came before. All of it rests on you now. The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. She had always known there was more to this journey, more than just a search for forgotten stories. But now, standing in the heart of this place, she realized just how much was at stake. The spiral was not just a symbol. It was a lifeline, a thread that connected the past to the present and the future. And she, somehow, was the one holding it. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. I don't know if I can do this. The memories, the people, the water, it's all so much. How do I protect something so fragile? Thomas's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, as he stepped closer. The spiral has always been fragile. But it has also always been strong. It exists because of people like you, Lyra, people who are willing to remember, to listen, to carry the weight of history without forgetting that the future is waiting for them. Lyra nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She had always felt like she was a part of something greater, something beyond herself. But now, she understood. The spiral was not just something to be admired or studied. It was something to be carried, to be honored. You are the keeper of the stories, Thomas continued. But you must decide how to share them. The world is changing, Lyra. The spiral has been dormant for so long, but the time is coming when its power must be passed on. The question is, will you be ready? Lyra's heart thudded in her chest. What do you mean, passed on? The world is waking up, Thomas said. The memory of the spiral is needed once more. But it's not just about preserving the past. It's about using that knowledge to shape the future. You'll face challenges, Lyra. People will come who don't understand the power of the spiral. They'll try to claim it for themselves. And when that happens, you'll need to decide whether to protect it, or let it go. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine at his words. She had suspected that the spiral was more than just a beautiful, ancient symbol, but she hadn't known the weight of it, the responsibility that would come with it. How do I protect it? Thomas stepped back, his figure blending with the light around him. You must keep the balance. Protect the water. Protect the memories. And when the time comes, pass the spiral to the next guardian. They will know when it is time. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. I don't know if I can do this alone. You're not alone, Thomas replied. The spiral is in you. The water is in you. You're never truly alone when you remember. She nodded, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She understood now. The spiral wasn't just a connection to the past. It was the key to the future. She would have to guide others, help them see the truth of the spiral, protect it from those who sought to exploit it. But there was one more thing she needed to understand. Where do I go from here? She asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her heart. Thomas's smile was faint, but warm. Follow the water. It will guide you to the next step. But you must listen. The spiral is not a straight path, it bends, it twists, and it changes. The key to unlocking its full power lies in your ability to adapt, to trust the journey. Lyra glanced down at the silver ring on her finger, the cool metal still warm against her skin. She felt its pulse, its energy, and the connection it gave her to the earth and the water. She understood now. The spiral wasn't just a place. It was a journey. And she had just begun to walk it. Chapter 17, The Path of the Protector. The first step was always the hardest. Lyra knew that. It was always easy to get lost in the thought of what had come before, to be consumed by the weight of the past, the duty she now carried. But standing in the cool embrace of the forest, with the silver ring still glowing on her finger and the journal heavy in her satchel, she knew that she couldn't turn back. The spiral, the water, Thomas's message, it was all in her hands now. She was the protector. The keeper of the memories. The one who would carry the legacy forward. But the question that weighed on her mind was this. Could she really do it? Could she protect something as fragile as memory? Could she ensure that the spiral remained intact when the world outside was shifting so rapidly? The water had shown her the path. But the path was not clear. There were no neat lines, no easy answers. The spiral was a living thing, a connection between past and future, and it was up to her to guide it, to protect it from those who would seek to destroy it. Lyra reached the edge of the forest, the familiar sound of the wind rustling through the trees filling the air. The world felt different now. The weight of the past pressed down on her, but she no longer felt burdened by it. She felt connected to it, an extension of the spiral itself, a living thread in the web of time. Her eyes scanned the horizon as she took a step forward. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew it was time to act. Time to move. The spiral was waiting. And the world needed protecting. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it wasn't meant to be. The spiral wasn't just a map, it was a guide. And it had always been waiting for someone to listen, to follow, to carry its message. Lyra moved with purpose, her feet finding their place on the earth. She could feel the pulse of the spiral deep beneath the surface of the world, pulling her forward, guiding her steps. It wasn't a path that could be seen, but it was a path she could feel. In her heart. In her blood. In the very marrow of her bones. As she walked, the trees parted to reveal an old stone pathway. The stones were worn with age, moss growing in the cracks, but there was something about them that felt ancient, timeless. These stones, like the spiral, had witnessed centuries of history. They had been here long before her, and they would remain long after she was gone. She stepped onto the path, feeling its weight beneath her feet, and as she did, she felt a rush of energy fill her. It wasn't the same as before: the quiet hum of the water, the pull of the spiral. This was something different. Something deeper. The world around her seemed to shift, and the air grew thick with power. The path stretched out before her, winding through the forest, leading her toward an unknown destination. And then, she heard it. The voice. Faint at first, like a whisper on the wind, but unmistakable. Lyra. She stopped, her heart racing. It was Thomas's voice. She hadn't heard it since that moment by the glowing pool, when the water had shown her the way. But now, it was clear. Strong. "It's time," he said. "The world is changing. The spiral is shifting. The water is calling you. You must be ready." Lyra swallowed hard, her mind racing. She didn't know what he meant by that. But she did know one thing. She was ready. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, her feet finding their place on the path. She could feel the spiral guiding her, feel it pulling her towards something. The forest seemed to part for her, the trees bending in a way that felt almost deliberate, as if the world itself were helping her move forward. She didn't know what awaited her at the end of the path, but she knew she had to keep going. There were things she had to protect. Things she had to understand. As she walked, she saw flashes of images, memories, perhaps, of people long gone. Of those who had walked this path before her. She saw Ellie Rose, her face filled with both sorrow and determination, walking alongside her. She saw Thomas, standing by the pool, watching her with a look of understanding. She saw herself, standing before the spiral, ready to take her place as the protector. The images flickered and faded, but they left something behind. A sense of purpose. She was the one who would carry the story forward. The one who would protect the spiral. The one who would remember. And then, as if the path itself had been waiting for her to take the final step, she reached the end. The clearing opened before her, and there, standing at the center of the grove, was a stone pillar. It was tall, covered in moss, its surface etched with symbols that she recognized from the journal, from the water, from the carvings in the stone. The spiral. The pillar pulsed with energy, the light around it flickering in time with her heartbeat. Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest, and reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers made contact with the stone, she felt a surge of energy shoot through her. The world around her blurred, and the air seemed to crackle with power. And then, everything went silent. The pillar before her glowed brighter, its surface shifting, as if something was awakening inside it. Lyra closed her eyes, Her mind focused on the spiral, on the water, on the memories that had led her here. And then, she heard it. A voice. Her own voice. I am the protector. I carry the spiral forward. I am the bridge between the past and the future. The light around her intensified, filling the grove with a brilliance that was almost blinding. And then, in that blinding light, she understood. This was her destiny. Chapter 18, The Choice of the Spiral. The air in the grove crackled with energy as Lyra stood before the glowing stone pillar, her fingers still tingling from the contact with its surface. Her heart beat in time with the pulse of the pillar, and the world around her felt both distant and immediate, as if time itself had slowed to a crawl. For a moment, everything was still. She could hear the wind rustling through the trees, the distant hum of the earth beneath her feet, and the soft call of birds in the canopy above. The grove had grown quiet in the way a room goes still when something important is about to happen. Lyra took a deep breath. She knew this was the point of no return. She was no longer just a witness to the spiral's power. She was part of it now, connected to its flow. The weight of what she had learned in the past few days about the spiral, the water, the memory was heavy, yet exhilarating. But there was one thing that had been hanging over her since she'd first stepped into this world. The choice. The spiral had shown her the way. It had revealed her destiny. But destiny was never easy. She had seen how the spiral connected the past, the present, and the future, how it lived within the water, within the trees, within the earth itself. The memories of those who had come before her were tied to it. But the future was yet to be written, and she was the one holding the pen. What would she choose? Lyra's fingers tightened around the journal in her bag. She could feel the weight of it, the centuries of wisdom contained within those pages. But she knew that the past was not enough to guide her now. The spiral needed to be shaped. The future needed to be forged with her hands. Are you ready? A voice, soft and familiar, broke through the silence. Lyra turned to find Myra standing at the edge of the grove, her figure bathed in the same ethereal glow that surrounded the stone pillar. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held something more, an understanding, a knowing that came from having walked a path similar to Lyra's. I think so, Lyra said, her voice shaking despite her attempts to remain composed. But I don't know what the future holds. The spiral, the water, it's all too much. I'm not sure I'm ready to carry this responsibility. Myra took a few steps toward her, her movements deliberate, as if each one was carefully chosen. She stopped a few paces away, allowing the space between them to remain but feeling the connection that had always existed between them. You're ready, Myra said softly. Because you understand. You've always understood. The spiral doesn't ask for perfection, Lyra. It asks for the willingness to listen, to trust in the flow of time and memory. Lyra shook her head. But what if I make the wrong choice? What if I fail? Failure is part of the path, Myra said. But the spiral will guide you, just as it's guided me, and just as it guided Thomas and Ellie Rose. The key isn't in perfection, but in your willingness to step forward, to embrace the unknown. Lyra looked back at the pillar, her heart heavy with the weight of her choices. She could feel the pull of the water, the call of the spiral urging her forward. But what if this was all too much? What if she wasn't meant to be the one who protected it? Look around you, Myra said, her voice gentle but firm. This place, the spiral, it's not just something to be protected. It's something that needs to be shared. You are the link between the past and the future. You are the bridge. The words echoed in Lyra's mind, and she felt the weight of them settle deep in her chest. She had always felt like there was more to her life than what she had known. Now, standing here, she understood that the path had been calling to her all along. It wasn't just about her, it was about everyone. The memories, the land, the water, they all belonged to the world, not just to her. I'm ready, she said quietly, finally finding the strength in her words. I understand now. It's not just about holding on to the past. It's about ensuring that the future is shaped by those memories. Myra smiled, her expression proud. You found it, Lyra. You found a balance. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the glowing pillar. The spiral was calling to her, its power growing stronger with every step. She could feel it deep within her, pulsing with the rhythm of time itself. The choice was clear now, and she knew what she had to do. She stepped into the center of the circle, her feet sinking into the soft earth, and reached out to touch the stone pillar once more. The moment her fingers made contact, the energy surged through her, filling her with warmth and light. The spiral seemed to awaken, its power spiraling outward, and Lyra felt the weight of the memories and the future settle into her hands. The water, the earth, the spiral, they were all part of her now. And she was ready. As the energy swirled around her, Lyra closed her eyes and whispered the words that had been echoing in her mind since she first touched the water. I am the protector. I am the bridge. And as she spoke, the world around her shifted. The future was waiting, and she had the power to shape it. Chapter 19, The Echoes of Change. The air had grown heavy with tension as Lyra made her way back to the grove. The connection she had felt earlier, the deep understanding of her role as protector of the spiral, had given her confidence, but now, as she stepped back into the world she once knew, a new wave of uncertainty crashed over her. The world was not the same. She could feel it in the way the wind shifted through the trees, in the way the earth felt beneath her feet. The spiral was still pulsing, its energy still flowing through her, but the world around her was changing, becoming more uncertain. She had to protect it, but she couldn't do it alone. As she walked through the forest, the memories of the past few days of Thomas, of Ellie Rose, of the spiral kept replaying in her mind. She felt them with her, like shadows following her every step. They were always there, always watching. But she was no longer just a part of their story. She was the one who would carry it forward. And that meant facing the truth of what lay ahead. Lyra had never been one to shy away from challenges, but what she had learned, what she had been entrusted with, was far greater than anything she had ever imagined. The spiral was more than a memory, more than a symbol, it was a force. And there were those who would seek to use it, to bend its power to their will. As she neared the clearing, the familiar sight of Myra's cottage came into view. But something was different. The air felt colder here, and the house, though still standing, seemed to emanate an unsettling stillness. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she approached the door, knocking softly. The creak of wood echoed in the silence, and when the door opened, it wasn't Myra who greeted her. It was someone else. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. He wore an expression of calm authority, but there was something about him that felt off. He didn't belong here. Lyra stepped back, her instincts flaring. "Who are you?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here for the spiral," he said, his voice smooth, but with an edge to it. "I've been following its path for a long time." Lyra felt the weight of his words. "You don't understand. The spiral isn't something you can control. It's not a tool for power. It's a force of nature. It's something that must be protected." The man's smile only deepened. "You misunderstand, Lyra. The spiral has been asleep for far too long. It is time for its power to be harnessed. And I am the one who will do it." Lyra's heart raced. She had known that there would be others who sought to control the spiral, to use it for their own gain. But she hadn't expected them to find her so quickly. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite herself. He stepped forward, his presence imposing. "I am part of a group that has been watching the spiral for years. We've been waiting for someone like you. Someone who would open the gate. Now that it's open, we intend to claim it." Lyra's mind raced. She had to act fast. She couldn't let them take the spiral. The water, the memories, it was all too important. The balance of the world depended on it. "You won't get away with this," she said, stepping back. "I won't let you take the spiral." The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he seemed almost amused. "You're just a child playing at being a protector. Do you really think you can stop me?" Lyra felt the surge of energy in her chest, the power of the spiral, the water, the land. It was all connected to her now. She was no longer just the keeper of the stories. She was the one who would shape the future. and she would not let anyone take that from her. Before she could react, the man stepped forward with surprising speed, his hand reaching for her. Lyra instinctively raised her hand to protect herself, and in that moment, the air around her seemed to respond. A shock wave of energy surged outward, sending the man stumbling back, his eyes wide with surprise. What was that?" he growled, regaining his footing. Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she turned and ran toward the woods. She didn't know what the man wanted, but she knew she couldn't stay here. Not with him. Not with those who sought to control the spiral. She reached the edge of the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the pulse of the spiral beneath her feet, the water calling to her. It was still out there, waiting. But she couldn't do this alone. She needed Myra. She needed someone who understood. Lyra stopped at the entrance of the clearing, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She turned back to see the man standing at the edge of the woods, his eyes fixed on her. "You can't run from this, Lyra," he called, his voice carrying on the wind. "The spiral belongs to us now." Lyra turned her back to him and ran deeper into the forest, the weight of her decision pressing down on her with every step. The world was changing, and she had to be ready. The spiral had awakened, but so had those who sought to claim it. And Lyra would not let them win. Chapter 20, The Final Confrontation. The forest had never felt so alive, yet so heavy. Lyra could hear the rustling of leaves behind her, the crunch of twigs underfoot as she fled deeper into the woods. Her breath came in quick, uneven gasps, but she didn't dare stop. She couldn't. The man, the one who had claimed to be part of the group that had been watching the spiral, was still following her, his presence lingering just out of sight. He was fast, determined, and Lyra knew that if she allowed herself to be caught, the spiral would be lost to him, lost to the world. She had to protect it. She had to protect what had been passed down through the ages, what had been waiting for someone to step forward and listen. But how could she, a single person, stand against the power of those who sought to control it? How could she protect something as ancient and vital as the spiral? Her mind raced with possibilities. She could feel the water beneath her feet, the earth responding to her every movement, but she knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't just run forever. There was a choice to be made, one that would determine the future. She reached the edge of the forest, her heart still pounding. The clearing stretched before her, the stone pillars standing as a silent sentinel. The same pillar that had once called to her, had once shown her the path. But now, it felt different, more like a battleground than a sanctuary. The man stepped into the clearing, his presence looming behind her like a shadow. "You can't outrun this, Lyra," he said, his voice calm but filled with a terrifying certainty. "The spiral is mine. It always has been." Lyra turned to face him, the silver ring gleaming on her finger. She could feel the energy of the spiral coursing through her, the power that had been entrusted to her. It wasn't just about protecting the past. It was about shaping the future. "You don't understand," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "The spiral isn't something to control. It's not a weapon. It's a connection. A living thing. You can't just take it." The man's eyes darkened, and he stepped forward, his hands reaching for her. "You are weak. You don't even know what you're protecting. But I do. I know what the spiral can do, what it can give. And I will have it." Lyra stepped back, her heart racing. She didn't have time to waste. He was too powerful, too focused. She had to end this now. With a deep breath, Lyra raised her hand, calling on the power of the spiral, the water, and the earth beneath her. She could feel the energy swirling around her, gathering in the air like a storm ready to break. The earth trembled beneath her feet as she stepped forward, her hands outstretched. The man's eyes widened in shock, but it was too late. The power surged through her, a wave of energy so intense that it sent him stumbling backward. He crashed to the ground, his hands clawing at the dirt as the energy lifted him off his feet. "Stop!" he cried, but Lyra didn't relent. The spiral wasn't a tool to be used for domination. It was a force, a connection that could heal, protect, and guide. The energy around her grew stronger, her pulse matching the rhythm of the spiral's heartbeat. She didn't know how long it lasted, minutes, hours, but when the power finally subsided, the man lay on the ground, panting, defeated. Lyra stood, her body trembling from the exertion, but the power of the spiral still hummed beneath her skin. The silver ring on her finger glowed faintly, a reminder of the connection she had to the past, to the water, to everything that had come before her. The man struggled to sit up, his face twisted in anger. "You think you've won?" He spat, his voice hoarse. "You've only delayed the inevitable. There will be others. There will always be others who seek to control what you protect." Lyra didn't answer. She didn't need to. She knew what she had to do. With a final glance at the defeated man, she turned and walked away. The battle wasn't over. It would never be over. But for now, she had won. She had protected the spiral. She had made the right choice. As she walked back toward the stone pillar, the air around her seemed to settle, the energy that had once surged through the grove now calm. She could feel the weight of the spiral in her chest, a responsibility that would never leave her, but she was no longer afraid. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she knew she was ready. The spiral had called to her, and now, it was hers to protect. She would face whatever came next with the strength and wisdom she had gained from the water, the earth, and the memories of those who had walked before her. And, in time, she would learn to trust the spiral just as it had always trusted her. Chapter 21, The Final Unveiling. The world was quieter now. The winds had calmed, and the trees stood tall, their branches swaying gently as if in acknowledgement. Lyra stood alone in the clearing, the stone pillar behind her glowing faintly in the dusk light. The battle with the man who had sought to control the spiral was over, but Lyra knew that this was only the beginning. Her breath came evenly now. She could still feel the weight of the spiral within her, the strength of the water, the pulse of the earth. The ring on her finger pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a connection. A bond. She glanced around, taking in the peaceful silence that now enveloped the grove. The world was not perfect, and the spiral was not an easy burden to bear, but for the first time, Lyra felt a sense of peace. She had made the right choice. Her role was clear now. She wasn't just the keeper of the spiral, she was the protector. The one who would ensure its balance, its power, and its memory. The responsibility weighed heavily on her, but she knew it wasn't a burden. It was a gift. For a long moment, she stood in the center of the grove, looking out at the vast expanse before her. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges, and there would be those who sought to disrupt the balance she had worked so hard to protect. But Lyra no longer feared what was to come. She had been chosen for this. The spiral had called to her, and she had answered. She would not turn away now. Her gaze shifted toward the horizon, where the sun had just dipped beneath the trees, casting the world in soft twilight. The colors of the sky were a reflection of everything she had learned, the blending of the past and the future, the light and the dark, the water and the earth. With a deep breath, Lyra turned back toward the stone pillar. She placed a hand on its cool surface, feeling the power of the spiral resonate beneath her skin. The memories of those who had come before her, their stories, their lives were now a part of her. They would always be with her. She closed her eyes, and in the silence that followed, she whispered the words she had learned to live by. I am the protector. I carry the spiral forward. I am the bridge between past and future. And with that, Lyra stepped forward, leaving the grove behind, ready to face whatever came next. The spiral had awakened, and she would continue its journey, with the strength and wisdom of those who had walked before her. As she walked deeper into the forest, the world seemed to part before her, the path ahead clearer than it had ever been. The spiral, the water, the memories, they were not things to fear, but things to cherish, to protect, and to share with the world. Lyra knew that she wasn't alone. The past would always be with her. The future, too, was waiting. And in the space between, she was ready.